taste your apple pie again. Things I'd give were too.
Well, now learn how to make pies, prize-winning pies. Let me tell you a little history about my pie making. When I first married my husband, I realized that he had been raised on homemade pie, homemade bread, homemade everything. And I had never made a pie before. So I decided that I would learn. So I got my recipe book out and had pictures. And it showed you exactly what to do. And I figured if I could look at a picture, I could learn to do it. And so I looked at those pictures and I tried to do what it said. And it said to cut the shortening in until it looked like cornmeal. Well, I was so inexperienced, I wasn't even sure what that was. But I finally got it mixed up. And then it came time to roll it out. And back then we had, one thing that was popular was plastic pastry, not cloth, but anyway, it was a plastic board that we would roll out the pie dough. Well, that was the worst thing to use because you couldn't get your flour mixed into it, and so your pie dough would just stick to the plastic, and I would roll it out and it would stick, and I would pull it back up and I would roll it out again, and I rolled it out 10 times. And finally I decided I've had enough. I can't do this. And so for 4 or 5 years I didn't even try to make pies. And then I moved somewhere where in our church we had a pie making class. And the lady that taught it was a prize-winning pie maker. And I learned some special techniques from her. And after that, I could make pie. In fact, I entered a contest and took 2nd place with my apple pie. So it's not hard. Many women are intimidated by making pies, but it's really not hard if you have the right tools. And that is very important, that you have to have the right tools. One of the things that you need to have is a pastry cloth. And as you can see, mine is well used. You need to have one that fits on a frame like this, not one that's just loose on your counter because it'll slip around. This has 2 boards here, and then you have your wire here. You slip it on there and under there. So this is what a pastry cloth looks like. You can find these probably on the internet, at a kitchen specialty store for sure, and I'm hoping to be able to provide a link for you to buy one on my website. But this is important to have. You can do it without, but this really helps. Another thing that I really like about it is it has the circle. It's an 8-inch pie and a 9-inch pie, so it helps you to get the right dimensions on your pie. So you need a pastry cloth, and of course you need a good rolling pin. Now, most pastry cloth kits come with a cloth sleeve that fits on the rolling pin. I don't have one that fits on here. Mine does just fine without it, but you'll be able to use a cloth sleeve on your rolling pin. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate how to do it by hand. You can also use your mixer with the wire whips, and I can demonstrate that as well. But I thought that you may want to know how to do it by hand. So this is enough for a 1 2-crust pie or 2 1-crust. I usually am making double this amount, but this is an amount that is easy to handle if you're just beginning. So we have 2 cups of flour in there. And then we have a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And it really seems to need a little bit of salt. Now there are some things that are important when you make a pie. You want to have your shortening be room temperature. You don't want it to be too warm. And then we'll talk about your liquid also needs to be ice water or ice temperature. And I'll show you. I'm going to demonstrate what they call a no-fail pie crust recipe. It's a little bit different than your normal one, but you can just substitute the same technique if you want to use a normal one, which I'll tell you about. Okay, so we've got this is 2/3 cup of shortening. Again, I like to use butter flavored shortening. I think it gives it a better flavor, so I would highly recommend butter flavored shortening. So we're just going to cut it in with our fingers so it's in smaller bits. This just makes it easier to blend in. As you can see, this is the same technique that we use for our sourdough biscuits and for the apple dumpling biscuit part. We're just going to cut our shortening in. But we're just going to start blending it. Again, just like we did before. Now, the smaller the bits, the more tender and crumbly and flaky your pie crust is going to be. And so you want to work it so that it's blended in quite nicely. Okay, when you're mixing this, just have fun with it. Just mix it lightly, just get everything mixed in. Enjoy yourself, because making pies is fun. And it's fun to serve it to your family and have them appreciate it. My husband loves pies, especially fruit pies. Okay, so that's what that looks like. Now, an ordinary pie crust just uses ice water as the liquid. I'm going to show you one that has a little bit different ingredients in it. But the important thing is that it's cold, and the cold helps the shortening to not melt, and it's going to make it flakier. You do not want your shortening to melt. You want it to be, the colder it is, the flakier it will be. And so this particular recipe that I'm using really makes a very nice, easy to handle dough. I think it's really great for beginners. And you might try both ways, you know, see which one you like better. I've also done that. I think this pie crust is a little bit softer pie crust than your other one. So you're going to have 1 egg. Mix that up really well. And then you're going to add a tablespoon of vinegar. A tablespoon of vinegar. And then I have some ice water. It's a half a cup of ice water. We won't be using this much. This is actually a double recipe, but it's kind of hard to do a half of an egg, and so we can just have it left over, or we can make another pie. So now we've got our liquid. Now we're going to sprinkle it into our dough. I'm going to do, at the beginning, it's probably going to take about 5 tablespoons, or maybe more. I'm going to just put 3 tablespoons in to begin with. Again, with your liquid, you don't want to add too much or it'll get gooey. And if you don't add enough, then it'll be dry and crumbly and difficult to roll out. So you're just going to put your liquid in and then just lightly fluff it. Okay. Now we'll do 3 more tablespoons, because I know it'll take at least that. Also, the amount of liquid that you use depends on the humidity of the air. If it's really dry, you may need to add more, and so forth. Now it looks like I'm actually going to be using most of this. So I've added 2 more tablespoons, so altogether I've got 8. Now it looks like I will be using most of it. See, it's still not really forming into a ball. It's still not completely moistened like you would like it to be. Okay, so we're going to add a little bit more. Okay, I think, okay, think it's pretty well moistened now. You can see there's no real dry spots there. Okay. So now we're going to get a little flour on our hands, and we're going to form it into a ball. And it makes, this is a good consistency. It makes a nice ball. We'll collect what's remaining in there. So I'm just going to kind of work it like this so it's, you know, worked in together so we have a nice ball. Okay, so that's a very nice consistency. Now, if you have time, it would be good to wrap it in plastic and put it in the refrigerator for half an hour. But if you don't have time, that's okay too. The refrigeration helps it to be a little bit flakier, but I promise you it'll be flaky enough. So we're going to make it into 2 balls, and each ball is going to be 1 crust. Okay. Now it's time to get our pastry cloth. Get some flour, and we're just going to put some flour down, and we're going to work it into our pastry cloth. So our pastry cloth is nice and floury. Let me give you a hint about my pastry cloth. After you wash it, don't put it in the dryer. Stretch it out on the frame, because it's if you don't do that, it'll shrink, and it makes it really difficult to get it back on the frame. Okay, so we have a ball here. We're just going to kind of flatten it a little bit. Put it in the center there. And we're going to put a little flour on our rolling pin again. Now, with pie crust, again, it's a light touch. And you're going to start in the center and go out. As you can see, it's a light touch. You don't want to press down hard and then come at the end, or start here and press hard. You want to keep an even kind of motion going here. And you get it like that. Now, an important part is we don't want it to stick, so we may need to add a little bit more flour. Okay, turn it around and do this direction. Now, you're going to try to keep it in a circle. But if you don't, that's okay too. We can always work with it. As you can see, I'm now going at different angles to try to get it the thickness that I want and the size that I want. Okay. Sometimes you have to add a little bit more flour. And again, I want to make sure that this can move on here, because I don't want it to stick. So I think you can see why this cloth is really important, because the flour works into the cloth and it doesn't just sit on top of the counter. Okay, now I'm going to be making a 9-inch pie. I've actually got enough dough here I can make a 10-inch pie. I don't like to roll it too thick. Again, this is a good consistency, and so we're going to kind of peek under there and see where our line is. Take a knife and just kind of eyeball it there. Okay. Just kind of checking to see if you're close to your circle. Looks like I'm a little bit over there, doesn't it? Okay. One thing that's nice about this Never Fail pie crust is that it is easier to roll it out, to take your scraps and collect them and roll out another crust. which is what I often do. Sometimes I'll make a little tart. Sometimes I'll just roll out the pie dough on a cookie sheet and sprinkle it with cinnamon and sugar. My kids really like that. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm going to collect all my scraps. And I've got a nice little ball there. By the time I actually do 3 or 4 crusts, I have enough to make another crust, and then I usually just make a crust that I bake, like I said. Okay, now I'm going to roll this out a tiny bit more. I've got it in the right circle. I'm just going to send it out a little bit more so I have enough overhang to make a nice fluted edge. Okay, so as you can see, I'm lightly doing this. Okay, now we get our pie pan. This is stoneware. Glass or stoneware is your best. Metal isn't quite as good for making pies. Now, I do have a smaller rolling pin, and I'm going to lay it right there. And I'm going to very carefully, without pressing down or pushing hard, just roll it. And I'll put my pie pan down, and I'll put that about where I think it should go, and then I just unroll it. Now I'm going to move it down into my pie pan. You don't want to stretch your dough. You want it to be firmly down where it's supposed to be. Okay, so we're down like that. There. That's the bottom of our 2-crust pie. Now, it looks like I do have plenty of overhang, so I'm just going to go ahead and go like that and scrape off the overhang. Okay. Now, we are ready to add our filling and do our top pie crust. Now, the next step in your pie making is to do your filling. And we're going to do fruit pie fillings in this segment. And then we can do cream pie fillings, which are in a baked crust. But we've got a triple berry. This is blueberry, raspberry, and marionberry. And then cherry, and then a fresh apple pie. The trickiest part about a fruit pie is the amount of thickening to put in, and it can vary. So you just have to do the best that you can do. There's various methods to thicken. You can use flour, you can use cornstarch, or tapioca. I like to use tapioca for berry and cherry pies, and then I use flour for apple pies. First of all, we'll talk about apple pies. Again, your variety of apple is important. Nowadays, with so many new kinds of apples, you can take your pick, but just make sure that they're tart, okay? And because some of them tend to be firmer, well, in the fall you can get McIntosh apples and Jonathan apples, which cook up very nicely, and they're a little bit more dependable. The newer varieties I'm not quite sure of. And so, because they tend to be firm, they need a little extra cooking, because you don't want your crust to be too done and your apples not done. So what you're going to do, this is 6 cups of apples, and this particular apple I've never baked with before, so I'll let you know how my family likes it. But this is a Fuji. So we're going to microwave it for a few minutes and soften it. We're not going to completely cook it, but we're going to soften it before we put it in our pie crust. So I'm going to put a cup of water on there. Whoops. And I'll put it in my microwave, and I think I'm going to try for, I think, 5 minutes. Now, again, microwaves vary as well as everything else. And my microwave is slow. And I kind of think we're going to have to do more time with it. But we'll start with 5 minutes. And then I'll show you how we put that in the crust. Now, our berry pie, we're going to use tapioca. And tapioca is very, very easy to use. It just needs to set for about 15 minutes before you put it in your pie shell. And so this particular pie, because I often try to cut back on sugar, I'm going to use Splenda in it. And we'll just see if my family can tell the difference. I don't think they will. So we're going to use, this is 6 cups of berries. We're going to put in 3/4 cup of Splenda. And then we're going to add 3 tablespoons of tapioca. 1, 2, 3. The tricky part with your pies is that you want to get it thick enough that it sets up, and so it's not runny. It's no fun to cut into a pie that just runs all over. So you want it thick enough, but you don't want to have to add too much thickening and get it kind of gummy. So we're going to do 3 tablespoons of tapioca. Now we're just going to toss it lightly. These berries were frozen, and I got them in a bag at a major food discount store. Very, very handy. When I was growing up, we could never get berries like this year-round, only in season. So now we can have wonderful berries all year round. So we're just going to mix that up, and we're just going to let that set while we continue on with the rest of our pie making. Okay, now these are canned pie cherries. It's difficult to get frozen pie cherries. It's my very favorite. But these canned are a pretty good substitute. In my area, there's a local grocery store that will get in 25-pound buckets of frozen pie cherries. And when we buy them, usually late summer, then my husband and I package them up into quart sizes, and that's what I use. But it's not always available, and so we're going to use our canned pie cherries. So we're going to drain our pie cherries. And again, I'm going to use tapioca in these. Now you'll need 2 cans of canned pie cherries for a 9-inch pie. So we're going to put them in our bowl, and we need to add a 1/2 cup of our remaining berry juice, or cherry juice, 1/2 cup. And now again, we're going to add some tapioca. This time, because it's a little bit less juicy, we're going to add just a little bit less tapioca. We're going to go for 2.5 tablespoons. Again, you'll just have to experiment. A lot depends on the juiciness of your fruit. These canned cherries tend to be more uniform than when you use frozen cherries, because sometimes you're not sure of the juice level. Fresh cherries are even trickier. I think a rule of thumb is with fresh cherries is to add a little bit more than you might think you need, because they do tend to be very juicy. Okay, so we'll mix that up. We need to put our sugar in. Because cherries are tart, we're going to use a cup of sugar. In. And another thing that is really yummy in pie cherries, in cherry pies, is some almond extract. So you just put a little bit of almond in. And then we're going to stir that up so that has time to sit while we go ahead and make our apple pie. Then we'll come back and make our berry and our cherry pie. So they're both going to sit. Now what we'll do is we need to check our apples and see if they've cooked sufficiently. And I think they need a little bit more time. So I'm going to give them about maybe 3 more minutes and see if that's enough time. You want them to be not cooked completely, but wilted and somewhat transparent. That's your goal when you cook your apples. I've put my apples in for 3 more minutes. These are a firmer apple. So now that I look at it, I'm going to give them 2 more minutes because they're quite a firm apple. And I want them to be done. I don't like apple pie where the apples just aren't done. So we're going to try for 2 more minutes here. We've now cooked for 2 more minutes, so that's a total of 10. As I said before, my microwave is older. It takes longer to cook. You're just going to have to use your good judgment. So now we make our sugar and our thickening. So in here I have 3/4 cup of sugar. Again, you may want more sugar. You probably won't want less, but my family does like things a little bit tartar. So you just decide, 3/4 cup sugar to a cup of sugar, okay? And there's a little bit of salt in that, like 1/8 of a teaspoon. Now we're going to put in 2 tablespoons of flour. And we're going to put in a teaspoon of cinnamon. And then we're going to mix that up. Now, we're going to sprinkle half of it in the bottom of our pie shell. So then you're just going to have to eyeball that a little bit. Just decide what you think is half. Then you'll take a slotted spoon and you're going to just lift out about half of your apples and set them in there. Okay. About half your apples. Now we're going to add 1/4 of a cup of our apple liquid. So I'll measure that. So just 1/4 of a cup of the apple liquid is all we're going to use. So we're going to pour that on top of the apples. We'll sprinkle the rest of the cinnamon sugar over it. I don't think I got half the first time, but that's okay. Now we'll sprinkle the rest of the apples. Okay. Another thing that can happen with apple pies is because your uncooked apple, if I would have put the uncooked apples in here, they would have piled quite high. And so then when the pie cooks, you have your crust and then a big gap and then your apples. And so pre-cooking your apples like that, like this, prevents that. Now we're going to put a little butter on top. Just kind of dot it with butter like that. That gives it an extra yummy flavor. And then just sprinkle a tablespoon of lemon juice. If you don't have lemon juice, don't worry about it. It's not a real critical step, but it'll add to the tartness of your apple and make it good. Okay, so there's our filling. Now we have to do our top crust. When you do your apple pie, if you choose, you can just put all your apples in together and then sprinkle the cinnamon sugar on top of it. That also produces really good results. So now we have our top crust. We have our ball. We're going to flatten it a little bit. And again, roll it carefully from the center to the outside. Now, this way of putting the top crust on will be the same for all your berry pie and your cherry pie. So I'll just demonstrate it here on the apple pie. We just want to make sure that it doesn't stick, so I keep adding a little bit of flour underneath. I don't want it to stick. Almost there. Now, if your pie dough gets uneven or jagged edges on it or something like that, just cut off a piece where it's too long and just patch it onto where it's too short. Every now and then your dough just maybe won't be quite the right consistency. You may have gotten it too dry. It may tend to crumble more. So just don't be afraid. Just patch it up wherever you need to patch it. The taste will be just as good, even if the appearance isn't perfect, but your appearance will be also wonderful. Okay, so now we're going to cut it again, as close as we can to that circle. I guess I should look to see how close I am. After a while, you get so you can just kind of tell that it looks like a circle. So, because this is the top crust, and I want to have some overhang, I want to make sure that I have some overhang. I'm just going to push it out just a bit because I want to have a fluted edge. Now you need to cut in some vent holes so the steam can escape while your pie's cooking. You can do initials, you can do stars, moons, suns, whatever you want to do. My trademark is I kind of make a half circle like that, and then I just kind of make some slits like that. That's what I usually do. Now again, we're going to, well, first of all, we're going to put a little bit of liquid. This is water. We're just going to dab it around the edge of our pie crust. And the reason we're doing that is that we're going to press the top crust to the bottom crust, and if it has a little bit of liquid on it, then it's more likely to stick. Again, we're going to carefully roll this up. We're not going to press hard or anything like that. We're going to be very careful. And again, we're going to position it where we think it looks even on this side and roll it over on the other side. Now, we have a lot of overhang, and so you want to leave about, we're going to leave about, I would say, a ½ inch. Just going to cut that. Now with the scraps, we're going to gather them together and we're going to make a baked pie crust. And in that we can put some coconut cream pudding, chocolate pudding, any kind of cream-based pie, chiffon pie, whatever you want to do. And if there's enough interest, we can have more pie demonstrations and learn to cook all kinds of pies and fillings and all kinds of yummy things. So that's what we've got there. Now, we're just going to tuck the top under the bottom. Now, I do not like a thick crust. That's why I don't like Botten pies. I think they have this really thick crust. And so, it's always a good idea to try to cut calories whenever you can, so I don't like to make my crust too thick. So we're just going to tuck it in there all the way around. We're catching that underneath it as much as we can. Make it as even as you can. Hopefully you've cut it evenly around. But there again, if you're not entering a pie contest, it just has to taste good. Okay. So, that's where we're going to have it look like that. Now we're going to flute it. And this is how I do it. I take my forefinger and my thumb and just go like that. Just pinch it. And then I put my thumb where the finger was, pinch it again. My thumb where the finger, pinch it again. And you can get so that you do this quite quickly. Now if it gets a little bit sticky, like it just did, you can put some flour on your fingers. Okay. So our pie is ready to go in the oven, except for one thing. Because our fluted edge tends to get done more quickly than the inside, we're going to either cover it with tin foil, or I have these tin foil covers. You can see they're well used. I've had them actually for a long time, and I just reuse them all the time. And you can cut them, and I just set mine on top like that, so that that little top crust doesn't get done too much. Okay, if you don't have these, then you can just get yourself strips of tin foil. That's maybe 2 inches wide, and then just carefully form it on your, any way you want to tear it a little bit, so you can make it go around the corners or in a circle. And very carefully put it over that fluted edge, because you don't want to mash your fluted edge, okay? So then you're going to bake it like that. I'm going to go ahead and use my little pie protectors. Okay, now it's time to put it in the oven. We're going to bake it at 400 degrees. I like to bake it at a little higher temperature. That way there's more assurance of the bottom crust being done. And also, you want to bake it on the bottom rack of the oven. That way your the bottom crust will be a little bit crispier. And that's what you want. You don't want a soggy bottom pie. And so that's one of our critical factors, is to make sure that the bottom crust is done. So it'll probably be in the oven about 45 minutes. Again, you have to gear yourself by your own oven. Okay, it's time to take our apple pie out of the oven. And I'm going to bring it out and show you what it's supposed to look like. But one of the things you want to look for is, as you look down here, you can see that the filling is actually bubbling. And you'll kind of see, you probably can't see it very well there, but you'll see the crust kind of go up and down. So you'll know that the crust is bubbling. So you want to make sure that, no, not the crust, excuse me, the filling. You want to make sure that your filling is bubbling so that it's cooked throughout and the thickening agent will work. Now this looks very good. This is nicely browned. And it's been bubbly on the bottom, and it's just got a nice brownness to it. Because we pre-cooked the apples, you're not going to see the crust fall because the apples cook down too much. You can see that it's bubbling in there. And so I think we have a nice, beautiful apple pie. There is one thing I would like to see a little different, and that's this got a little bit brown for me on the edges. I'm not really sure why, but I'll have to watch that next time. Maybe it was in just a little bit too long, or maybe my covering didn't quite cover that part right there, but pie making is something that you learn. Every pie you learn something. What could I do differently to make that better, or so that it doesn't happen again. But that's a beautiful apple pie, and I think it will taste wonderful. One thing I do want to mention is it has been a while since I made this kind of pie. I told you one thing wrong, and that is you put half of your sugar solution in, and then you put all of your apples in, and a 1/4 cup of your apple cooking liquid, and then the rest of your sugar solution. I kind of did a half and half thing, like you would do lasagna or something. But just make sure you put all your apples in. I wanted to show you this because it is an option if you have the fruit available. I live in an area where we can get bushels of apples in the fall, and so I always get 3 or 4 bushel. I make applesauce and do different things with apples. But one of the things that I do is I make frozen apple pie filling. And we like a grated apple pie. And so I will peel my apples and grate them in my food processor and mix about 5 cups of grated apples and a cup of sugar and probably a 1/4 cup flour and a teaspoon of cinnamon and a tablespoon of lemon juice. I mix that up, and then I freeze it in my Ziploc bags. And so I very easily can make a pie because my filling is all done. In fact, I generally do it that way because it's a little bit easier and doesn't take as much time. But I did it this way for you because I know that most of you don't have the convenience of having your frozen pie filling.
Taste your apple pie again. Things I'd give where to begin. Forsake this world we're living in.
Okay, now I'll demonstrate how to do your pie crust with your bosh, with your mixer. It's very easy. I'm going to actually make a double recipe because I have 2 pies I need to make up. But you use 4 cups of flour, make sure they're level cups. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we have 4 cups of flour, and then to that amount we need to put a teaspoon of salt. And those are all the dry ingredients you need to put in. Just flour and salt. Put our lid on, just mix it for a second. Now we need to put in 1 1/3 cups of shortening, but we're going to put in half at a time. So these measuring sticks, and again I use butter flavored shortening, we're going to put in 2/3 of this. Now this, all you have to do is just put it in. Put your lid on. Take a paper towel so flour doesn't fly all over the place. Turn your wash on. Okay, so we have half of our shortening in. Now we'll do the other half. So I need to put in about 1/3 of this stick. Now again, you don't have to be exactly precise, so you can eyeball those kinds of things. It's not like it's that critical, whether it's 2/3 or 3/4, it's okay. Now, this time we're not going to turn it on and just let it run really fast. We're going to, because that way it would actually get too globby. It would maybe mix in too much. So we're just going to kind of pulse it a little bit. I'm going to watch it. just going to watch it to see where it gets to the consistency that I want it to be. You're not going to turn it on, just run it really fast. Okay. I think that's exactly where I want it to be. As you can see, the consistency is very good. There's a few little globs, but it's blended up really, really well. As you can see, it really is easier to do it in a mixer than to do it with the by hand. By hand is easy and it's doable, but this is just a little bit faster. And so that's why I always make enough for two double crust pies. So now I've got a lot of flour mixture in there. So to make one double crust pie, I'm going to get 3 cups. I'm going to measure out kind of lightly. I'm just going to kind of scoop it in there, just like that. I'm not going to pack it in. Put 3 cups in my bowl. 1, 2. And there should be about 3 cups remaining. Now I'm going to go ahead and use our Never Fail pie crust, which is 1 egg, and then a tablespoon of vinegar, and then a half a cup of ice water. I did have ice in there, but it melted. So we're just going to mix it up. Again, we may not use all this liquid in this particular pie crust, but we may. We'll just have to see how it goes. Okay, again, we do it the very same way. Just sprinkle it in. Now I think on the other section I showed how to mix it. So I'm not going to go ahead and do all the mixing for you right now because it's on the other section. But the important part to understand is you take 3 cups out of what you've done, and that makes a 2-crust pie. And so I'm going to go ahead now and make up my berry pie, my cherry pie, and then I'll show you what the finished product looks like when we get to that point. Okay, we've had quite a day of pie making. We made apple pie, triple berry pie, cherry pie, and we've cut off all of our scraps. And now I put them together in a ball. And I'm going to show you how you can use this. And it's not going to be perfect, and we're going to have to do some patching, but we're going to make a 1-crust pie, and then we can put some coconut cream pie in it, or whatever other kind of cream filling we want. My family loves coconut cream pie, so I'll probably demo that. Try to put it together as best you can, okay? This particular pie dough recipe rolls out the second time really well. So you're going to put a little flour on your board, put your pie down. Now as you can see, it's got a few more cracks in it. And so we're going to do we'll probably have to do a little bit of patching on it. I just want you to see that it's okay. It's okay if you have to patch sometimes. This is not going to be as perfect of a circle as we could get it the first time. And with pie dough, you can use a fairly firm push with your rolling pin. But again, I'm going to put flour underneath it. As you can see, I've got a pretty big crack right there. I'm going to try to remedy that. Because this is the second rollout, I'm probably using a firmer touch than I ordinarily do. This is actually rolling out quite nicely for the second time around. Okay, so I pretty much covered where I know my circle is going to be. So we're going to get our knife, and we're going to have some more leftover, but I'll probably just throw it away, mainly because we have so much pie to eat that we probably won't eat anything more. So I'm going to cut around my circle here. Another thing you can do with this one crust pie, of course, is to do your pumpkin pie. So instead of baking this pie shell, we could fill it with pumpkin filling. I actually have quite a bit left over here. I could do something else with it if I wanted to. I'm going to, because I'm going to make a fluted edge, I am going to push this out. I want to make sure that I have enough hangover that I can make a nice fluted edge. So I cut it out to a 9-inch pie, and now I'm just expanding it to make sure that I have a hangover to make a fluted edge. Again, I take my small rolling pin, carefully roll it. This is a 9-inch pie pan. Again, I'm going to position it to where I think it should be. Now sometimes you have to move it around to get it so it's more evenly situated on your pie pan. And sometimes you have to do that with the top crust as well. And you can do it, just carefully move it. Now we're going to make sure we put it on down in. We don't want to stretch this at all. Okay, now we're going to check around and see if we think that it's fairly uniform around the outside. And I have a few spots that I think are a little bit long, but for the most part I think we've done pretty well. Now what you're going to do is kind of roll it in and fold it under. You can see that right there. Roll it under. Okay. So you're just going to kind of fold it under there. You want to make a nice edge. You see why you have to have the hangover, so you can pull it up and make an edge there. Now you would do the same thing whether you're doing this as a pumpkin pie. And when you make pumpkin pie, you don't pre-bake this. You just put your pumpkin filling in your dough here without pre-baking it. But for a cream pie or a chiffon pie, then you're going to pre-bake it. And I will, okay, so then you're going to go around just like you did with your 2-crust pie. You're going to flute it. Just push in. And if your fingers are sticky, then put some flour on them. Just go around. Okay. Now, when you bake it, you need to prick it. Now, there's also such a thing as pie weights, which I really didn't know existed until just a little while ago. And pie weights are little weights that you put around your pie crust, your 1-crust pie crust, so that it doesn't puff up in certain places. But the traditional way is just to poke it. And just make sure you get all along the sides. Now we're going to cook this in a hot oven, 425, probably about 8 to 10 minutes. You want to make sure you cook it on a hot oven. It makes for a flakier crust. And so I'll put it in the oven, and then I'll show you what it looks like when we take it out. Okay? So here's our one crust pie. That's just exactly right. It's nice and golden brown. It's got a few bubbles on the bottom, but not any huge ones. That will make an absolutely delicious crust for coconut cream pie. Well, after I make my fruit pies, my two crust pies, I usually have enough pie dough left over that I make a baked crust. So then I have to fill it. And so the thing that we like to do the most is coconut cream pie. That's my family's very favorite. This is a basic cream pie recipe, and to it you could add bananas, coconut, make your chocolate, or just have vanilla. So it's a basic cream pie recipe. And I've seen several cream pie recipes. I like this one the best, and I think it's the easiest. And I'll tell you what a few variations can be. Okay, this is one crust pie. This is 3 cups of milk. Now if you want it richer, I'm using 2%. You can use whole milk, or you can use part half and half. And some of the recipes I've seen from restaurants use part half and half. But it's rich enough for me just to use 2%. And if you're really trying to cut back on calories, you can use skim milk or 1%. And it doesn't taste quite as rich, but it's still good. And so you decide how you want to do it. So I'm going to make this in the microwave because I think it's the very easiest way. I used to make it on top of the stove before I had a microwave. And either you had to use a double boiler and you had to stir for a long time, or if you used just your regular saucepan, you had to stir constantly to avoid scorching, and it seemed like it just scorched so easily. And I always had little children, and I would somehow or another forget to stir constantly, and so I scorched a lot of milk. So the microwave is a really great way to do it. Very easy. Now my microwave is an older microwave, and so it might take my microwave longer than yours. But this is 3 cups of milk, and I'm going to heat it for 6 minutes on mine number 8 power, which is not quite high power. But with milk and eggs, you're not supposed to use your full power. It's better to use it a little bit less than full power. So I'm going to do it for 6 minutes. Cookmatic level 8. And while that is going on, heating, I'll get the rest of my ingredients ready. I have 3/4 cup of sugar in there, and then I'll use 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. And you're going to blend those together because you can't put cornstarch by itself into a hot liquid because it will be very lumpy. So you have your 3 tablespoons of cornstarch and your 3/4 cup sugar. Also, some pie recipes I've seen have a little bit more thickening, but I like it with a little less thickening, so that's what I do. You could also use flour, and you would use 1/4 cup of flour instead of 3 tablespoons. Just a little bit more flour than cornstarch, but both produce a good result. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to separate your eggs. It's very easy to do it without an egg separator. So you need 2 bowls, crack it, and then just carefully pull it apart. Have your yolk in one part, and then just pour it back and forth. And as you pour it back and forth, keeping the egg yolk intact, more and more of the white will go into your bowl. So, and then we'll set our egg whites aside. What I usually like to do with them is I use them in scrambled eggs. Just use them up with my eggs. I don't throw them away. I also don't make meringue. We just prefer whipped topping on our cream pies rather than meringue. So all our eggs are separated. Also, you want to add just a little bit of of salt. Not a lot. Okay, our milk has heated up for about 5 minutes. Now, some microwave recipes say just to put your flour and your sugar mixture right in your cold milk. I think it works better to put it in your warm milk because then you just don't have to stir it so much as it heats up. And so we've got our, in this case, sugar and cornstarch and a little salt. Now we're going to stir as we put that in there. Okay. Now we're going to put it back in the microwave for about 3 minutes. And then we'll bring it out and put our egg yolk mixture into it. So this is, again, we'll put it on mine, Cookmatic Level 8. So this is a recipe that while you have your microwave time going, you can do other things. And it's really easy. Just let your microwave do the cooking and come back and check it every 3 minutes and do some stirring, and you've got your coconut cream pudding. Okay, so we've had this in the microwave for 3 minutes, and it's just it's hot and slightly thickened. Again, your microwave may take a little bit less or a little bit more time. Just make sure that you stir it every 2 to 3 minutes if you're heating it up for more. But probably 3 minutes is about right. Okay, now we've got our egg yolks in here. Now, if we were to put our egg yolks in this hot mixture, they would cook, and we might get little bits of egg yolk in our pudding. A little bit of our hot liquid, and we're going to put it in our egg yolk so that we heat our egg yolk up, so that we don't just dump egg yolk, pure egg yolk, into our pudding and then have it cook instantly and have little flakes of egg yolk. So we're going to stir that in. So now we're going to put it back in the microwave, and this time in my microwave it will probably take 9 minutes, but what I'm going to do is set it for 3 minutes and then stir it 3 more minutes, stir it some more, 3 more minutes, and stir. If you don't stir it, it'll get lumpy on the bottom. It just won't be mixed evenly, so you've got to remember to stir it after 3 minutes. So just set your timer for 3 minutes and then stir it afterwards. Now you can go and put some dishes away or do something else for 3 minutes and just come back and stir it. You don't have to sit there and stir it all the time. So we'll take a break for 3 minutes. I went ahead and just stirred it every 3 minutes. When you're done, when it's done, you want it to be bubbling. It needs to be boiling. Not boiling high, but it's going to be bubbly, and that way you know that it's thickened enough. And so, a word about containers. I use this kind of container. The important thing is that you use one large enough so that it doesn't boil over in your microwave. And this, of course, is plenty big for that. So now I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. And you'll have to forgive me, but I just really don't measure. I just put a little bit in. And then we have a tablespoon of butter. Put that in. And now at this point, what you have is vanilla cream. And so this would be your vanilla cream pie. But we're just going to add coconut, and then it's going to be coconut cream. You would probably add about a cup, but I'm just going to add actually about half of that package. And again, it's a matter of taste, of wanting more or less coconut. And we stir it in. Now my husband says that coconut cream pie is best after it sets overnight and the flavors have time to really meld. But sometimes it just doesn't last that long. Okay, so you've got your coconut stirred in, everything really nice. You're going to pour it into your shell. Now that's actually enough for that one. I have another little one from leftover pie dough. Now as you can see, this one just isn't very perfect at all. I just took the leftover dough and made it into a pie shell. So now I could pour the rest in here and make it nice and high. which I really think I may do. And I can put something else in there. There wasn't that much more, but it makes a nice full pie. Okay. Now you're going to cover that, if you have it, wax paper, because then it doesn't stick as much. If you don't have wax paper, put it in your refrigerator until it's cooled, and then go ahead and cover it with your saran wrap. But try not to. It's difficult not to have the saran wrap touch it, but if it's cooled, it'll be fine. Just saran wrap it, wax paper if you have it. So your family will love it, and then serve it with either pure whipped cream or Cool Whip. Either one's fine.